There is a product sold in America for $10,000. People buy it when they're in the worst moment of their lives. They're told it'll protect their loved one, preserve them, keep them safe. It doesn't. It's called a protective seal or casket. It has a rubber gasket around the lid. That gasket costs about $30 to manufacture. Here's what it actually does. It traps moisture inside. No oxygen, no airflow. Just heat, pressure, and bacteria. The body breaks down faster. In some cases, the sealed casket swells from gas buildup. The funeral industry knows this. They've known it for decades. They sell it anyway. Because that casket isn't designed to protect the dead. It's designed to extract money from the living. And once you understand this one product, you understand the whole industry. The funeral business doesn't sell caskets. It sells guilt. The average American funeral now costs around $8,300. Add a burial vault, cemetery fees, flowers, transportation, and the real number gets closer to $10,000 or $15,000. Cremation is cheaper, but even that has been pulled upward by the same machine. What used to be a simple service is now a menu of upgrades. The urn, the keepsake jewelry, the premium package, the private viewing, the memorial slideshow. Every piece has a price tag. And here's the statistic that should make you angry. Federal investigators found that about 1 in 4 funeral homes violated the funeral rule. That means they failed to give price information they were legally required to give. Not optional information, required information, 27%. That number was much lower a few years earlier. The industry isn't getting cleaner, it's getting more aggressive. And the timing matters. Cremation is rising. Traditional burial is shrinking. Revenue per customer is under pressure. So the industry did what extractive industries always do. It squeezed harder. To understand why this works, you need to understand the worst kind of purchase in the economy. A distressed purchase. When you buy a car, you compare prices. You walk away. You sleep on it. When you buy a house, you get an inspection. You read the contract. You ask annoying questions. When you plan a funeral, none of that happens. Your mother died yesterday, or your father, or your spouse. The body is already at the funeral home. The family is calling. The service has to happen soon. You're tired. You're embarrassed to talk about money, and every cheap option feels like a confession that you didn't love them enough. That's the trap. 4 out of 5 families don't shop around. They pick the funeral home closest to them, or the one their family used before, or the one the hospital quietly suggests. And funeral homes know this. They even have a term for it. They call it an at-need purchase. You need them, they don't need you. That imbalance is where the money lives. Now meet the company most people have never heard of, Service Corporation International. SCI is the largest death care company in North America. It owns funeral homes, cemeteries, crematoriums, and related businesses. At its peak, it owned thousands of funeral homes, but you usually won't see the SCI name on the sign. That's the trick. They buy a local funeral home. Maybe it's been in town for 3 generations. Maybe the sign still says Miller Family Funeral Home, or Smith & Sons, or something that feels small and familiar. Then they keep the name. Same building, same sign, same phone number, same soft lighting in the lobby. But behind the scenes, everything changes. The owner is gone. Corporate targets arrive. Pricing systems arrive. The funeral director who used to run a family business is now an employee inside a public company. The Consumer Federation of America found that SCI funeral homes can charge 47 to 72% more than independent funeral homes for similar services. Same chapel, same body transport, same paperwork, different owner, higher bill. And the family never knows. They think they're supporting a local business. They're not. They're paying a grief premium to a corporation in Houston. So how do they get you from the front door to a $10,000 contract? The first move is the three-tier trap. You sit across from a funeral director, they slide a brochure across the table. 3 packages: basic, traditional, premium. The basic package feels cold. No viewing, no flowers, no ceremony. It feels like you're doing the bare minimum. The premium package is ridiculous. Extra cars, extra flowers, better casket, better program, better everything. And then there's the middle package. It feels responsible, respectful, balanced. That's the one they want you to pick. The cheap option exists to make you feel guilty. The expensive option exists to make the middle option feel reasonable. You think you chose freely? You didn't. You were anchored. And here's the part they don't want you to know. Federal law requires funeral homes to give you an itemized general price list. You have the right to choose services one by one. You do not have to buy the package. But in an undercover FTC sweep, about 27% of funeral homes failed to provide required price information. The law says you get the list. The industry hopes you never ask. The second move is embalming. They make it sound medical, necessary, respectful. Of course, we'll need to prepare the body. That sentence does a lot of work, because most families hear it as a requirement. It usually isn't. Embalming is cosmetic. It temporarily slows visible decomposition so the body can be displayed. That's it. In most states, embalming is almost never required by law. Even for a viewing, refrigeration is often enough. But embalming can add $700, $1,000, sometimes more. And it creates a chain reaction. Once you embalm, a viewing feels natural. Once you have a viewing, a nicer casket feels necessary. Once people are coming, flowers and programs and cars start to feel expected. One decision unlocks 5 more charges. That's why the language is so careful. They don't have to say, it's required. They just have to make you feel like saying no would be strange. And grieving people hate feeling strange. The third move is the casket. Federal law says you can buy a casket from anywhere. Costco, Walmart, Amazon, a local wholesaler, an online casket company. The funeral home cannot charge you a handling fee. They cannot refuse it. They cannot punish you for bringing it in. That is the law. But the casket is where a lot of the profit lives. So funeral homes learn to fight without technically fighting. They raise the basic services fee. They imply outside caskets are lower quality. They use private model numbers so you can't compare prices. They say things like, we can't guarantee products we don't sell. Not a refusal, just pressure. Then there's the protective casket, the rubber gasket, the sealed lid, the promise that isn't quite a promise. The funeral rule prohibits claims that these caskets preserve the body. So the industry changed the words. They say protective. They say sealer. They say peace of mind. They can't say it preserves your loved one, but they know what you'll hear. And when people are grieving, they don't buy steel and rubber. They buy relief. The fourth move is pre-need planning. That's plan ahead, pay now, protect your family. That sounds responsible. Sometimes it is. But it can also become one of the ugliest traps in the business. You pay $5,000 or $7,000 or $10,000 today for a funeral that might happen 20 years from now. That money is supposed to go into a trust or an insurance product, but families don't always understand where it goes. They don't always know whether the plan is portable. They don't always know what happens if the funeral home changes owners. And when a funeral home fails, families sometimes discover the contract they trusted is worth less than they thought. Recent Reddit threads show the same thing over and over. Families are confused about timelines, death certificates, back-ordered merchandise, earned delivery, discounts, prepaid arrangements. One person even joked that their local funeral home was basically offering a discount because the family had held another funeral there recently. A loyalty program for death. That sounds absurd. But it tells you something important. This industry has learned to make grief repeatable revenue. So why hasn't anyone stopped this? Someone tried. In 1963, Jessica Mitford published The American Way of Death. It exposed the price gouging, the sales pressure, the unnecessary services, and the way funeral homes used grief as leverage. The book became a bestseller. Congress paid attention. Regulators paid attention. 21 years later, the FTC created the Funeral Rule. The rule is simple. Funeral homes must give you prices. They can't lie about what the law requires. They can't charge you for things you didn't approve. They can't refuse a casket you bought somewhere else. Simple. But a rule without enforcement is just a suggestion. Over a 12-year period, the FTC brought only a handful of enforcement actions. The average fine was tiny compared to the size of the industry. New York City did its own investigation. Many funeral homes refuse to give prices over the phone. Even though pricing transparency is the whole point of the law, the math is obvious. Break the rule. Make thousands. Maybe get caught. Maybe pay a fine smaller than one funeral bill. That's not enforcement. That's permission with paperwork. But there is one force the funeral industry can't lobby away: fire. In 2000, about 26% of Americans chose cremation. Today, it's over 60% and still climbing. This changes everything. A traditional burial can run $10,000 or $15,000. A direct cremation can cost under $1,000. No embalming, no viewing, no expensive casket, no burial vault, no cemetery plot. For the consumer, it's simpler and cheaper. For the funeral home, it's a disaster. The building still costs money, staff still costs money, the hearse still costs money, the chapel still sits there. But each family spends less, so the industry had two choices: compete on price or invent new things to sell. It chose the second: premium urns, keepsake jewelry, memorial videos, witness cremations, celebration of life packages, online tribute pages, upgraded containers, the same upsell machine rebuilt for cremation. And that's why violations can rise at the same time cremation rises. When the old profit center collapses, the pressure moves somewhere else. Here's what you do with this. First, ask for the general price list. If they won't give it to you, leave. Second, remember that embalming is almost never required. Ask directly, is this required by law or is it optional? Third, buy the casket somewhere else if you want to. Costco, Walmart, and online wholesalers sell caskets for far less. The funeral home has to accept it. Fourth, consider direct cremation. You can hold a memorial at home, at a church, at a park, or anywhere that actually meant something to the person who died. Fifth, plan before the crisis. Not because the funeral home told you to, because your family needs clear instructions when they're exhausted. Write down what you want. Tell somebody. Put it somewhere they can find it. And most important, separate love from price. The funeral industry wants you to believe that spending less means loving less. That's the lie. A $10,000 casket does not prove love. It proves someone knew exactly when to ask for the money. The funeral industry has spent decades perfecting the art of extracting money from grief. Not every funeral director is bad. Some are honest, some are kind. Some genuinely help families through the worst day of their lives. But the system around them is built to sell. It sells packages. It sells upgrades. It sells fear. It sells guilt. And it works because most people don't learn the rules until the moment they need them. Now you know them. If you want more breakdowns of the hidden economics behind everyday industries, subscribe. And in the comments, tell me what industry we should expose next. Diamonds, baby products, Disney vacations, grocery stores? I read every comment. Thanks for watching.